Hey there, Solid Signal blog and Solid Signal podcast fans. It's the week of February 22nd, and this podcast is going to be one of those off-the-rails kind of ones, not necessarily angry like some of the other ones, but more introspective. And I like to do that every so often, and I'm not sure if it's something that you enjoy, but I got to say it feels good to me to do, and it's a little bit clearing my palate so that I can go on and talk about products and technical stuff in the coming months and not drive myself completely nuts. So let's get started. The topic of this week's podcast is "Nostalgia ain't what it used to be." That quote is attributed, it turns out, to Yogi Berra, and it further turns out that he didn't say it, which makes it kind of meta because Yogi Berra's sayings apparently ain't what they used to be. The saying "nostalgia isn't what it used to be" was actually attributed to somebody named Peter de Vries, whom I have never heard of, and by next week I will have forgotten the name of, and that's kind of sad. But anyway, it describes a kind of a situation where we try to remember the world that we want it to be and not the world that really was. And that's kind of the essence of nostalgia. And so you're asking yourself at this point during this fairly leisurely and what most likely will turn out to be an over-length podcast, exactly what this has to do with any of the things that are offered at Solid Signal, or is it just a total waste of time, something to keep you busy while you're stuck on the freeway? Well, there actually is kind of a tie-in here, and the point is three of the major broadcast networks, because there's Fox also, but what the three broadcast networks that were around when I was a kid have done with nostalgia in the month of February. And February may be a lot of things. It may be Black History Month, as we're reminded, but it happens to also apparently be Nostalgia Month for television networks. Let's start with CBS. CBS broadcast Super Bowl 50 at the beginning of February, and 50 is a pretty good time to be looking back at stuff, and the Super Bowl sure has changed. I think, although I have not researched it, that the cost of one commercial today probably would have paid for the entire event back in 1966. And I thought that CBS did a fairly decent job here because, yes, there was a lot of nostalgic feeling kind of going into it, but obviously they just, they limited the application of nostalgia to a few minutes at the beginning and the halftime show. They brought out all the quarterbacks they could find from various Super Bowls past, and then during the halftime show, predictably, ever since, the last 10 years of wardrobe malfunctions and whatnot, they brought out what they thought would be fairly predictable and comfortable levels of talent. Well, they had former Coldplay frontman Chris Martin, and they had the always popular Beyonce, who maybe wasn't quite as nostalgic and innocent as they hoped, but probably not the point. The point is that they framed a current event around some nostalgia, and that's probably the best thing that you can do. So I'm recording this on Monday, and so it was last night that ABC aired the 2-hour victory lap known as Disneyland 60-year anniversary, the wonderful world of Disney, which was a nostalgia fest, just dripping with self-congratulation and promotion. And I will admit that I did not watch it live, but actually zapped through parts of it to kind of pick and choose the things I thought were interesting. Now here, ABC chose a middle ground where they were absolutely being totally self-congratulatory. I mean, because let's be honest, Disney has, in the last 30 or 40 years, simply cornered the market on childhood. I mean, look, they own Star Wars, they own Marvel Comics, they own the Muppets, they own Pixar, they own all the Disney TV stuff and movie stuff, and on and on and on, and of course ESPN and ABC, and this is incredible. If this were a technology company, they'd probably be broken up as a monopoly. But when all is said and done, this wasn't just a clip show of some of the stuff that we've seen about Disneyland over and over again. Yeah, there was some of that because, look, you're not going to create new source material from 1955. I get that. There's only so many clips of Walt Disney. But there were also musical performances from current artists. There were, something like Elton John where he originated a song and he's still around and he's still popular, so I get that. There was an attempt to bring this forward and look at the future of Disneyland and Disney properties in general. So I would give this kind of a solid B as far as nostalgia goes, where I should say that I gave the Super Bowl an A because I kind of think that's how you do it. And I thought this was a B. This was partially just saying, hey, look at all the great stuff that we've got on Disney and ABC, and partially saying, you should maybe be a little scared because there's very little of your children's childhood that we don't own at this point. And then there was NBC. I've been pretty hard on NBC in the past, and mostly because of their past leader, Jeff Zucker, who I don't know as a person. He may be a wonderful fellow, but I gotta say the decisions he made during his tenure at NBC took a once proud company and sent it right down the toilet. There's a clean way of putting it. And especially when you realize that NBC and CBS have been around longer than ABC, and that, in fact, ABC was spun off from NBC because NBC at one time was so dominant that the government stepped in and broke it up, which is pretty amazing. Well, obviously, it's become somewhat of a cliche to say how far NBC has fallen, and the fact that if they didn't have the Olympics every couple of years to boost them, and if they didn't have Christina Aguilera and The Voice, that they also wouldn't have a whole lot going on. All of this is true. So what we got from NBC was the must-see TV tribute to James Burrows. This slippery nostalgia fest was nothing more than a reminder of how good NBC used to be, and therefore rather made it seem sort of sad that NBC just isn't that anymore. I mean, look, I'm of the age where, yes, I liked Friends and Will and Grace and the other shows that they were celebrating, and Cheers and Night Court and all that stuff that NBC used to own in the 80s and 90s, and they just don't anymore. And unfortunately, this show, which was excessively overhyped, really did nothing for me but A, make me feel old because I'm older than some of the Friends. Actually, I think I'm older than all of them but one. And also, just remind me that NBC's got so much work left to do. So I would call this an F from the point of view of nostalgia, and I'd also call it a rather typical last-ditch effort from NBC, who was trying desperately to stay relevant in an environment where broadcast networks are in intense competition with other entertainment outlets. So, looking back at nostalgia, I guess, like I said, it ain't what it used to be. I guess nostalgia used to be better when I didn't know exactly what things were like in the past. Today I'm a little smarter, and I'm sad to say that today's efforts at nostalgia have not convinced me that the world was a better place, whether it was 1955, 1975, or 1995. At any rate, this podcast has gone much, much longer. This may be the podcast that is the longest that I have ever done, and because I was just kind of rambling, and okay, so I thank you so much for your indulgence and for your time. I promise to keep them under 5 minutes in general, and I look forward to hearing your comments. I hope you do comment, and I will talk to you all soon.